There's nothing wrong with me. I'm as good as everybody else. Do you lie to yourself about your own responsibility for your own actions? I'll talk about that in just a few seconds. Have you ever run into somebody who you know is having issues, but they just don't want to talk about it? Or they want to talk about it, but not do anything about it? They don't want to admit any part that they have caused. They only want to blame it on other people. Perhaps they just want to ignore the entire situation altogether. It's very frustrating to deal with when you run into this type of situation. Now, I'm not saying that listening isn't probably more important than talking. However, even in my own life, I've known in the past people that simply when you try to talk to them to iron out the issues that might be causing the problems, that they either just go back into themselves, or they don't really and truly listen, or they start occupying themselves with something else, and you can tell they're not really paying attention. Well, what is that behavior? What's causing that? And what does it lead to? When we avoid the situation, we don't fix it. I could avoid many things and pretend that they're not there. But if we don't address them, we can never solve them. And I've seen people do this, and their lives don't get better, they simply get worse. People try to pretend that everything's okay on the surface, that they've got their act together and everything's fine, but underneath they're just dying inside. This destroys marriages, it destroys relationships, it destroys employee-employer relationships. It affects our entire nation in every aspect of it because people simply do not express the things that are troubling them, and those issues are never dealt with. I'm not saying we should whine all the time about silly inequities, but what I am saying is that if there is a problem in your relationship, in your family, it is better to deal with it than to ignore it. There might be a little pain in dealing with it, but once you've dealt with it, you can move on from it, grow from it, and get better because of it. When we see Jesus in the scriptures, when someone comes to him for healing, they have an obvious problem. And then sometimes if they hadn't have come to him, they might not have been healed. But the first thing Jesus does a lot of times is forgive their sins. That's the real problem. And then he goes on to heal them. He did that as an example. He said, is it easier for me to say your sins are forgiven, or is it easier for me to say, take up your bed and walk? So he proved his divine nature doing that. But I think that the problem of sin was so important that needed to be dealt with that he was trying to show that to people. What I mean by that is a lot of times we talk about his miracles, but we forget about his miracle of saving people from their sins. And we can look at sin in a lot of ways. We all have sinned, but even in our own lives, if we do not deal with the problems or the sin in our lives, the issues we face, wherever we are, it just goes on to destroy us, and we can never get better. So I think the Bible has set a great example of how we should deal with the problems we encounter in our life. Have a great day. Be kind to each other. See you next time.